Watching Business Nigeria coming to you live from our studios here in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. Let's get into our second conversation now. President Bola Tinubu has directed all government ministries, departments, and agencies to purchase compressed natural gas-powered vehicles. Well, according to the statement by the president's spokesperson, Mr. Ajurin Gelale, the move is part of the country's efforts to transition to cleaner energy, as CNG-enabled vehicles have been certified to produce lower emissions. But what are the prospects for Nigeria's energy landscape with the adoption of CNG-powered vehicles? Now let's get talking now. I'm joined by energy expert and Associate Director of Commercial Practice at Anderson, Mr. Oladejo Adeyemi. He joins me live here in the studio. Thank you for your time. Mr. Oladejo, it's good to have you with us here.
Frank.
Now, let's get into the conversation. Well, it will seem that the president has taken the lead.
Absolutely.
I know, as a leader in this initiative. So, in the context of Nigeria's energy transition, how significant is the president's directive to the ministries, agencies, guys, go there and start, converting all these vehicles, start getting vehicles that are CNG powered?
Thanks for that question, Frank. And like you've mentioned, the impact is going to be very significant because every time you're about to implement something that you've been aware of, it's important that you demonstrate, even from the part of the government, the level of seriousness that you expect. So what the presidential directive, what it means expressly is that the presidency is interested in getting the MDAs kickstart this process, and that's quite significant. That in itself, it's a very strong signal, that consumer and indeed the public in general can use to measure the level of seriousness that the government really intends to put into the energy transitioning process.
And when you look at, of course, there are attendant implication, of course, implication is there. You have, cost of infrastructure. So talk to us about what infrastructure changes and investment are necessary to support these widespread adoption. I mean, it will cost a lot, isn't it?
It's definitely going to cost a lot because if you look at our history as a nation, we've been fully dependent on fossil fuel. So if we then have, originally the plan to transition is up until about 2050, and then kickstarting this at a time like this, imagining the extent of infrastructure. I mean, it was last week that the Ministry of Petroleum was sharing that it's going to require about 10 billion USD to fully transition, And so you can imagine the extent of infrastructure development that is going to be required. And when we say infrastructure in what specifically? When you're talking about compressed natural gas, the tanks, you have to talk about the stations where the refueling is going to happen. You have to talk about distributions. You have to talk about there are a lot of milestones, to be achieved within that value chain before you can have anything that is close to what you have, when you look at the network, the distribution network for fossil fuel.
And not to talk about the market and, of course, those who are expected to come into play in this. But speak to us, I mean, you've talked about opportunity. Could you talk to us about the kind of opportunity that you foresee, investment, funding that you foresee for local manufacturers? You're going to have suppliers, you're going to have, service providers in the CNG industry as a result of, this government adoption. So speak to us about that as well.
Okay, so because Nigeria is rich in gas, it's estimated that we have about over 200 trillion, cubic feet in terms of our gas deposits. So because of that, this is going to open up that space to a lot of players, and players within the value chain can deal with. Okay, if you just take the distribution network, for instance, if you focus on that, for you to have that done effectively, that's going to create a lot of opportunities for a lot of people. And because it's an alternative that is cheaper and it's cleaner, so it's not like an alternative that's going to cost even you, the consumer, the final consumer, more. What it promises is that it's going to cost you far less, estimated up about maybe 50% or even lesser than what the current situation, cost you. So because of that, everyone is bound to gravitate, over time, as much as those complexities and initial challenges and those certain issues are going to be resolved, into the adoption proper, then what you're going to see is it will create a lot of opportunities for a lot of players within that distribution channel and even all other pathway that you have within the value chain.
So if you have to put a value to it now, can you value it in terms of how much of monetary, the value of the industry itself in terms of monetary value?
Just between, let me use this as an example, just between October 2023, when the presidential initiative, for CNG was set up, and now it's been reported that you have public-private partnership to an extent of about 50 million USD. Compared to what is required to revolutionize the entire, that space and get it working, it's a far cry. But when you look at that amount in itself, it's significant within that very short while. So as the government continues to demonstrate this willingness and the capacity to pursue that interest, it encourages a lot of players to move in that light. And by the time you look at that, if you've had 50 million USD in PPP in less than 6 months, I mean, you can do the mathematics, what is going to be in a couple of months and even a couple of years to come.
I also understand that the government, has put in about 100 billion, naira already.
In buying buses.
Buying buses and all of that. So this mandate or directives of ministry and all of that. Again, the question is, there are challenges, which is peculiar to Nigeria. The challenge of having to implement this as quickly as possible. Do we have enough resources? Do we have enough, infrastructure or infrastructure-wise? Do we have that? Those are some of the challenges that are on ground. So what are your recommendations in terms of, speeding up the implementation process for this directive?
So sometimes for you to have something start properly, you may not be very keen on speed. And I'll tell you why. There are some vehicles, for instance, a lot of vehicles are going to be converted. There's a lot of government deposits and efforts going on with getting conversion tools, getting technicians trained, getting even the final consumer comfortable. There are instances where people are saying, oh, I'm not comfortable, so I'm going to have a tank at the back of my trunk, and it's going to be there permanently.
That's right.
So some people also think about safety. So when you talk about speed, it may be necessary to gain mileage within a reasonable timeline, but speed should not be the focus. The focus should be, because if you look at what it has taken us to have built all of the infrastructures that we now use when it comes to storage, when it comes to distribution, when it comes to the safety of it. Of course, everything has an element of risk one way or the other, no matter what you do, but you want to get it to a point where everyone is comfortable. So yes, what it will take to move things faster would be such directive that government has demonstrated by saying, I'm really serious about this. So MDAs kickstart from your end. And you did mention the 100 billion naira to buy 3,000 buses. So imagine a situation where those buses now begin to function. Imagine a situation where people are now feeling the impact directly on their pocket. So a trip that would have ordinarily cost you, say, 2,000 naira is now costing you 700, or it's costing you 1,000 naira. So that way, if you own a vehicle, or if you will be encouraged to be able to say, okay, I have to do this. And you then see instances where people would drive their own cars to those stations, and then try to be on the side of compliance with respect to CNG adoption.
What sort of stakeholder engagement, in terms of conversation and engaging other stakeholders or investors who should come into the space? Yes, the government has taken the initiative and say, look, ministries, agencies, go out there, don't buy, petrol-powered vehicle, henceforth, start buying. But again, you need to also start a conversation with the private sector, bring in the manufacturers. You have over 3,000, members of the association that are there. I'm not speaking for them, but I know they have a lot of manufacturers in Nigeria. So what sort of stakeholder engagement would you want to see in place to also support this initiative? Because a lot of people say, look, yes, this is good, but how do we get it fast to every Nigerian on in the street. And it seems that this directive is, immediately within the public sector.
This directive, indeed, it's a step in the right direction. And in terms of the extent of stakeholder engagement that should happen, it has to be intense. And I'll tell you why it has to be intense. Look at what has happened. It's looking like, okay, in May, this administration announced the removal of subsidy, and then started doing something about it. So it's expected that it's already established that there's a gap because now you have people having their take home and they are struggling to have that take them home indeed. So because of that, the extent of engagement that should happen should be intense. And if it is opened up to private sector, and like I cited an example of the 50 million USD, if it is opened up to private sector, you would have a lot of interested participants, and you would have willing investors, as long as it's clear to everyone that the government means what it wants, what it has said, and is definitely putting his mouth where his money is.
And I want us to look at, when it comes to a kind of when it comes to a kind of engaging people as well. Like you talked, yes, of course, it will take a lot of intense conversation to make that happen. But also, don't forget that there are also people who are seeing challenges on the road of this. I mean, they are seeing that there are challenges, to make this happen. And that's because they say there is no gas, shortage of gas and all of that. And that's why they say, power breakdown. The grid is breaking down every now and then. So do you also think that we should revisit that PIA, because there's Petroleum Industry Act, which of course has not been fully maximized? Don't you think this also needs to be revisited?
Sometimes the issue really is not about the existing laws.
All right.
Sometimes you have to look at how feasible is seamless implementation. Frank, there are challenges everywhere in the world, and it doesn't matter what initiative you want to adopt or you want to put up. You're going to have challenges. What really matters is how deliberate are you towards solving those problems.
Right.
Reviewing PIA, some people would feel it's a little bit, it's rather too early. We've not allowed it to run its course. Let it run for a while. Let's give opportunity for people to, let's unearth all of the challenges, put them together, and then see what can happen, what can change or what needs to change, between when it was put in place and the reasonable timeline. At least you would expect maybe a 5-year period to see how has it fared. But in terms of saying government should pander towards any challenge that is just coming up, I think it might appear rather too soon. So the best practice would be put all of the issues together and then develop what would help in putting forth solutions, towards those challenges. That would be my best shot at that.
Let's look at the impact of these on the energy landscape. Consumption is going to be affected as well. People are not going to be queuing at the filling station as they were.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a lot of consumption, a change in consumption. Consumer behavior is going to be affected as well. So speak to us. What's your outlook for this? Do you think this will continue, or do you think there will be a change in the way we consume this commodity?
Certainly there's going to be a change, because what you are introducing to the landscape is an alternative, a cleaner alternative, a better alternative. Frank, beyond costs, climate change challenge is a big deal. This is also going to impact emission. So you're not just putting up. It's like nature is forcing you to gravitate towards an alternative. So certainly it's going to affect consumption of fossil fuel. The one which, you mentioned queue. If I have alternative, for instance, why should I go to the regular fuel station to queue up? So certainly consumer behavior is going to change more and more as people get to trust the product and the alternative. More people will gravitate towards it. So if it's not extremely necessary for me to use the regular petrol, I would certainly not get it. So in terms of a bigger issue to that is even the issue of revenue. Because if you look at an economy like ours that has been monolithic for the longest, So the question is, some school of thoughts hold the fact that, CNG is not going to affect the revenue, of the government. But the question is an alternative, and it's not going to be free, So, and remember that I said that Nigeria also has huge gas base, which has been left all along, that the potential has not been fully tapped. So given our population, given the demand, given what we already have at the base, it's going to force everyone to put all hands on deck and ensure that it works out perfectly for us.
Let's talk about, harmonizing and harnessing this as well. It's going to impact the transportation sector as well, because you talk about sustainability in that instance. So a whole lot is going to affect a whole lot. Speak to us, how do we harness these initiatives such that it will impact on transport sector, all right? It will impact on manufacturing across over. Every sector of the economy will have to benefit from it.
Absolutely. So the way this is likely going to play out is that the government has taken the lead, like we did say at the start of the conversation. Now, what then needs to happen is you will see some parallel running. Some quarters would, let me liken it to when the government mandated people to go get their BVN. Some people didn't. But at some point when it became practically difficult or impossible for you to do transactions, a lot more people started lining up. So what you're going to see is, you will see those people that will be early takers. You will see industries that are going to be laggards, those that will say, it's really not making any difference. I think it's the same thing. At the end of the day, I'm still going to pay for it, until you start seeing proofs. So when you are in the same business as a manufacturer, for instance, you're in the same business with your competitors, and you see that the energy cost of your competitor for year one was X, and your own energy cost was X plus 2, you then have to start asking questions. Could this be the CNG factor? And if you could pin it down to the CNG factor, then certainly the following year, you have to go the way of CNG. So what the government needs to do more is to show consistency. Now they've started from the MDAs. The MDAs are now buying vehicles that are CNG compliant, CNG adopted vehicles. And then you see significant infrastructural development in terms of building stations. So I'm traveling from Lagos to Akwa Ibom. I don't have to worry that, how am I going to be able to refill if there's a need for me to refill. I get what I'm saying. So by the time you have all of those significant infrastructural improvement or development along that line, it will naturally encourage a lot of people consuming. And
in the equation or in the ecosystem, you're also going to see food production as well, because you talk about supply gap of food from the hinterland, to the urban city and all of that. So in time past, we've seen difficulties for farmers moving their goods from farm, to the city as well. So this is more like an ecosystem for the country.
It will definitely impact all of those sectors. Today, it might cost you as much as it has cost you to get your goods to a particular port, the landing cost, to move it to some part of the country, just because of the cost factor. So if you are able to reduce the cost, the travel cost significantly, what you then see is it's going to definitely impact on what the eventual price of those products and the farm produce, what they are going to be.
One more question before I let you go. Look at the global oil market at the moment in terms of volatility, price, and all of that. At a point, it goes up. And if you look at benchmark, in terms of crude oil benchmark, it's around 76 US dollars. Because initially it was reviewed from 67 US dollars to about $77. How do we, harness these oil rally that is going up, to impact on our own revenue target? Because I know the federal government is targeting about 18 trillion in terms of revenue in the 2024 fiscal year.
I think harnessing it will have a lot more to do for us as a country, given our peculiarities, with ensuring we tackle our security, challenges. Because when you look at what are the things that may be inimical to production, we have to first deal with that. And at the core of that lies security issues. So in terms of ensuring that we are positioned in a way where we can even have production go on the
Right.
way it has been projected. That would then help us to be able to put up those the products, in the quantity that has been projected. And when you have that, it would certainly then help our revenue drive.
I think we'll have to leave it there. Associate Director, Commercial Practice at Anderson, Mr. Oladejo Adeyevi. Thank you for your time
Thank you so
on
much,
the
Frank.
program.
Thank you for
Appreciate it.
having
Do
me.
have a great day.
You too. Thank you, Frank.
Interesting conversation there. You'll be watching the Business Nigeria coming to you live from our studios. And it's